Hello, everyone. This is a presentation of the California Santa Valley chapter of the California Native Plant Societies. Tonight's presentation is a panel discussion with a high amount of activity on favorite native plant books and resources. And we have four panelists: myself, Vivian Neou, Rebecca Schoenberger, and Shelkie. Before we start our program, we want to acknowledge that work done by the Santa Clara Valley chapter of CNPS lies in the homeland of the Muwekma Ohlone, the Ama Mutsun tribal band, the Tamyan Nation, and the Ramaytush Ohlone, who still live and thrive in this area today. We hope to learn from them and support their work to restore traditional practices and heal from historical trauma. And if this is your first talk, we would love to know how you found out about us and where you are. Please share that in the chat. These talks are put on by a team. I'm your host. Our Q&A moderator is Penny Pollock, and apologies for misspelling her name. Our YouTube moderator is Barbara Hunt. Vivian Neou is our tech tonight, as well as one of our speakers, which I went through before. So we always have a team behind these presentations. If you don't know about CNPS, we are a nonprofit environmental organization that got founded in 1965. By now, it has over 10,000 members in 35 chapters spread all over California and even including Baja California. And our chapter covers Santa Clara and southern San Mateo County. And we are part of the CNPS mission to save California native plants and habitats, bringing together science, education, conservation, and gardening to power the native plant movement. And we would really love it if you would decide to join the organization. If you love native plants, it's a way to support conservation of California native plant diversity. You get several journals, Artemisia and Flora, more sciencey and a more general purpose, both with really great articles and both very accessible. You also get our Blazing Star chapter newsletter, discounts at local nurseries, and more. You can go to cnps.org/join, or you can use this QR code here to take you right there. We have a number of upcoming events. Our next talk is Keying with Natives. It's actually a workshop with Dee Himes on Friday, February 18th at 7:30. Vivian, is that in person or Zoom?
It's Zoom.
Okay, it's Zoom. And then we have our monthly photo group meeting on Friday, February 25th at 7, which is another informal meeting where people are encouraged to share photos, and there's lots of great discussion. You can just come and hang out and look at great photos or share some of your own. We do have some field trips going on, but we didn't put them up here because they're full up. So it'd be great to get onto our chapter news mailing list where these things are announced weekly, so you can jump on them. All of these things are on cnps-scv.org or on Meetup. Our chapter nursery online store is open through Monday the 14th. You can have plants delivered between Belmont and San Jose, or you can pick them up at the nursery. All of the proceeds benefit CNPS SCV. In addition to plants, we've got t-shirts, books, signs, and more plants are added regularly. So it's good to check back, at least, check back weekly to see what's up on the site. And you can, there's the web address of our Square site, or you can just find it at cnpsscv.org. under our gardening nursery tab. And this is the Chapter News mailing list that we were talking about, which is a great way to find out what's going on. And you just, there's the email, you send an email to that to subscribe. And if you don't want to write that down, if you go to our website, which is cnps-scv.org, there is a link to join it there. And by the way, this attributed photo is from Vivian Neou. She is a fantastic photographer. And just some housekeeping about how we're going to be running the talk tonight. Please mute your microphones in general. You can type questions or comments into the chat at any time. We're going to have 3 segments where our panel presents, and then we will open it up for questions and also suggestions. We encourage you to put your suggestions when we're talking about resources into the chat, and we're going to compile our suggestions and your suggestions into a list which we'll email to all registrants. And we expect to finish by approximately 9 p.m. This is being simulcast on YouTube, and it will be available for later viewing. So here we are with about tonight's programs, and thanks to Rebecca Schonenberger for that photo. I'd like to introduce our panelists. Vivian Neou is a retired software executive. She got interested in native plants after she retired and started hiking. This led her to the CNPS SCV nursery. She became active, and now she's our nursery manager. She's also our chapter's technology coordinator, and she does a lot for the state organization, including she's on the CalScape Advisory Committee. Rebecca Schonenberger is the owner and designer and contractor at California Nativescapes. She's got, her educational background includes an Associate of Science in Park Management and a BS in Environmental Studies. Since 2011, she's been a Santa Clara County Master Gardener and continues to improve her understanding of edible landscaping using ecologically sound methods. Shelkie is also a landscape designer, and she's founder of waterefficientgardens.com, an online landscape design business that excels in low water and native plant garden designs. She is a sustainability-driven entrepreneur committed to developing water-saving and ecosystem-friendly solutions. Prior to her landscape business, she worked for over 10 years in the high-tech industry here in Silicon Valley. She has a certificate of achievement in environmental horticulture and design from Foothill College, and also an MBA from the Anderson School at UCLA. Well, in contrast to all of this, I am an amateur gardener, formerly in the tech industry, but quite a while ago. And I've been interested in native plants for about 30 years now, and used a lot of resources along the way. So we will get started now. I'm going to stop sharing, because mostly what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking. And just 1 minute, I'm getting myself oriented here. Our first section, we are going to be talking about favorite books. And then we're going to have a second session. Our second segment will be talking about web resources. And our third one will be a bit of a catch-all. We'll be talking about courses, workshops, and different kinds of experiential resources. So I'm going to kick off talking about 3 of my favorite books. One of the ones that I used a lot when I was especially trying to redo my yard and reimagine my yard in a native way was a book called The California Landscape Garden. It's Ecology, Culture, and Design. And these names will go into our list. It's by Francis and Ryman, and it has a lot about habitat gardening as well. But this book really helped me think about what I wanted my yard to do. And then another thing that I'm always looking for is figuring out what plants will actually grow in my yard. I have heavy clay, really crappy soil, and so one of the books that I like getting books that have a lot of cultural information in them, so I can decide if I think it actually is possible to survive in my yard. And Native Treasures by Nevin Smith is a great book. I mean, Nevin Smith is a really accomplished, I guess, horticulturist. And in his book, he covers some of my favorite plants, manzanitas, ceanothus. He talks about a number of flowering plants, redbuds. He even goes into some of the perennials. And I found this book really helpful. It's kind of a lot of information about some of my favorite plants. I also really like grasses a lot, and that's one of the things that's sometimes hard to find out about. So I got the book Wild Lilies, Irises, and Grasses by Harlow and Jacob. And it goes into a lot of different grasses and about their culture. And that was important when I was planning my meadow. So those are the books I wanted to highlight, and I'll turn it over to Shelkie.
Sorry, forgot to unmute. So I have several books that I really like. The first one is called California Wildlife. Oh, sorry, California Native Plants for the Garden. I don't know whether you can see it. Oh, okay. So this is okay. This is one of the best California native plants books that are out there, as I see it. What distinguishes it from other books is that it has a pretty complete collection of the native plants, and it also has very detailed information about each of the plants. So in the book, it covers about 200 to 300 native plants. And those are the main plants that you will see that the designers like us will use in a garden. So if you want to find information about the most used native plants, this is one of the best books that are out there for you to get those information. When I am doing my design, I'm a landscape designer, and native gardens is one of my specialty. This is the book that I love to go to for references. So for each of the plant, it talks about, it gives you all the regular information like the light condition, water condition, soil, and everything. And then after that, it talks about how the plant is like. For each plant, it has beautiful photos that's really nice. And then it talks about how it looks like, and then how you can use it in a garden. For example, for a mountain mahogany, if you describe it as, it will grow to be 10 to 15 feet tall, but you can easily prune it to be under 6 feet wide. So after that, then you will say, if you want to put a tall plant in your garden, then you will feel safe, right? If you are concerned that it might grow too tall, then you can feel good that you can prune it. So it's a very useful book when you are thinking about picking a plant, a native plant, to put in your garden and how to maintain it. So that's one of my favorite books. Madeline, do we go by one or cover all three altogether now?
Please cover all three.
Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is that it's called Plants and Landscapes for Summer Dry Climates. So as its title indicates, these are the plants, not just for California natives, but also for summer dry or Mediterranean climates. So the books cover about half native plants, another half the Mediterranean or drought tolerant plants. These two books are very similar in that they all give very detailed, very nice coverage for each of the plant. And between these two, I think you pretty much have a very good handling of most of the plants that you can see in a California drought tolerant or native garden. So what's good about this book is that it also gives lots of photos. So you can see how the plant is like and how they will look in a garden. And because these are from summer dry climates, so they are also very good plants to use in a California garden. So that's the second book here. The third one is it's called California Wildlife Habitat Garden. So as its name indicates, if you're interested in building a wildlife garden, this is a very good reference book. It talks about three major wildlife gardens, the bird garden, the pollinator garden, mainly the butterfly and bees, and then the ponds garden, wildlife that live in a pond environment. And for each of these gardens, it gives a plant list, a recommended plant list, and also gives the sample gardens for each of the type. So you get pretty detailed information like how to build such a garden, what a good garden will be like after you build it, and many other related information. So yeah, these are the three books that I would recommend.
Thank you, Shelkie. I'll turn it over to Vivian.
Okay, hello. So I am going to, I'm going to talk about three books as well. And the first one is the Helen Popper book, California Native. Oh, I don't have it set to the mirror. Anyways, this is the book, California Native Gardening, a month-by-month guide. And it's by Helen Popper. So this one I've used, so I've been in native gardening probably 7-8 years now. Before that, I just had the usual exotics in my garden, and I was a big reader of Sunset Magazine. And one of the things I used to rely on was that monthly column that said, this is what you do this month. So I adore this book because it's like having Sunset, but for natives. And so, you know, each month there's a reminder about what you need to do. And even now, even though I've been doing it for years, I still pretty much every month just like take a quick check and make sure that I haven't forgotten to do something. I think it's a fabulous, fabulous book. And if you guys don't know the history about it, for those of you who are on the Gardening with Natives email list, and for those of you who are not, I strongly recommend joining the list. It started from in our chapter when a group of people who were interested in native plant gardeners got together and would meet regularly to share tips. And Helen, who is actually a professor of economics at San Jose State, was the note taker. And she eventually turned those notes into this amazing book. So this book draws on the knowledge of many, many people who have been associated with our chapter for quite a few years. and many of the wonderful pictures in it are also from people in the chapter. So there's this nice historical linkage to actually where we are today, because these talks are an outgrowth of that old Gardening with Natives, those meetings that were held in person, and which hopefully someday we'll have again. But I really loved this book, and I highly recommend it. The other book that I was super excited to find when I got into native plant gardening was California Native Plants for the Garden, which again, you're probably seeing flipped. It's by Carol Bornstein, David Frost, and Bart O'Brien. It was out of print for a while, and I think it was really difficult to get, but it's back in print. We actually have it in our nursery store, so if you want to buy it, you can just go to our nursery store and purchase it there and then stop by and pick it up. But it's an absolutely fabulous reference manual. It has design tips, it has background on different habitats in California, and it describes many, pretty much any plant that you're going to want to put in your garden when you're getting started, and many that, you know, it's just useful to look through it to get ideas about what you might want to add. So I depend very heavily on these two books just for regular gardening. We keep them at the nursery, so when people used to be able to come to the nursery to shop in person, and hopefully in the fall when that will happen again, these are books that we make available for people to look at as they're shopping, if they want to find things out. So the third book I'm going to describe is actually one that we use a lot at the nursery, and anyone who does any propagation, I would recommend getting this book. It's called Seed Propagation of Native California Plants. It's by Dara Embry. It's pretty much the Bible. If you do any kind of native plant growing from seeds, you need this book. It has pretty much every plant in it, and it's from the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. And like the California Native Plants in the garden book, it was out of print for quite a while. They did not have the source for the book, so they couldn't just reprint it. What happened a couple years ago was a bunch of volunteers at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, which is where the book comes from, actually retyped the whole thing, and they updated all the scientific names, and it's now available. You can buy it on Amazon. Again, terrific book if you want to do any kind of propagation from seed. It really has everything. So I highly recommend getting it if you're doing propagation from seed. And those are my three books. So Madeline, who's next?
Well, actually, Rebecca has some. Rebecca, you'd like to say you have some thoughts right now too, right?
Sure. Should I just start with the slides, or
do you?
And for books, I mean, Audubon, like the field guidebooks and the UC Press guidebooks. Those, I think, were the only books I had listed specifically.
Okay, let's do the slides when we do the experiential part, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Our next segment, we're going to talk about web resources, but now we'd like to open this up for suggestions and suggestions of books and any questions that you may have. So feel free. We're fairly well, we have 39 people.
Madeline, it's okay if people want to unmute, right? If anyone has anything.
Yeah, if you want to unmute and ask a question or make a suggestion, this is a good time to talk. We're talking about books right now, so we'd love to get your suggestions, and if you type them in. Okay, this question about, do these books talk about pruning or maintaining native plants? Helen Popper's, yes. It's all about that. And that's why it's such a good book, because other books mention that a little. Before Helen Popper's books, it was really frustrating to me to kind of be making it up as I went along about how to maintain native plants. And she goes into it in great detail. So I think if you want to learn about maintenance, that book is absolutely necessary. And I also, I just want to throw out there too that I checked, and all of these, almost all these books we're talking about, except possibly the one from Grassroots Ecology, are in the Santa Clara County Library. So if you're not sure whether this book is the one you want to buy, you can check them out from the library and see what you think. See what you think before you commit to buying it. If you love it, I suggest you buy it so you have it at your fingertips. And the Cupertino Library even has a section called the California Western Archive. It's a reference section, and most of these books are in this reference section, so you can go there and look at them. Anyway, just want to throw that out there. The library is a great resource for you, and the San Mateo system, I didn't have time to check it out, but I'm sure that they also have a lot of these books. Does anyone else have any books they'd like to to recommend to others, to us, to go on our list?
I wanted also to put in a plug for the next time we have an in-person event, and we often have used books for sale at the in-person events. And that's a great place to find a lot of really interesting books that you can't find easily elsewhere, because have been a lot of books that are no longer in print and you just can't get to them. I was looking on my bookshelf and I found one that I looked at a bunch before. I haven't, but there's, like the Saratoga Horticultural Foundation had a great book called Selected California Native Plants. I don't know if you can see that, but that's one that, you won't be able to find unless you go to something like the used book sale at one of our events. And sometimes you can find these kinds of books. So that's another place to get interesting books on native plant gardening. Go ahead, Madeline.
Yeah, so I, like, for example, the two books I talked about are in print, and all of the books I talked about are in print. There are some other reference books that are out of print, which means they get a whole lot harder to find, and if they're rare and used, they can get quite expensive. So we're trying to mostly recommend books that are in print and more easily accessible. Okay, we are going to put all of our suggestions and some others that didn't make the cut into a list that we're going to distribute afterwards. I think we can move on to our next segment, where we're going to talk about web resources. And I confess that more and more, the first place I look when I'm trying to figure out about plants is I go to Calscape. Calscape.org. It's a web-based app, database, tool, originally built by a CNPS volunteer, and now the state organization is maintaining and expanding it. And it has included information from a number of sites like Theodore Payne and others. And the really great thing about Calscape is they have a lot of detailed cultural information. And like I said, for example, I have heavy clay. So I have been over optimistic about whether I can get a plant to survive. I'm learning that if they say this plant wants fast drainage, I really should not put it in my yard unless I have a very elevated, I have a really built up area where a pot to put it in. And, so Calscape has the type of drainage, the type of soil, the sun exposure, how much moisture it needs. It has a little diagram that shows you the shape of the plant and its ultimate height and width. And they have a little write-up typically about most of them, and they also tell you which nurseries usually carry them. It's really useful. And I also like Las Politas is a nursery in Southern California. They have a very chatty database. And since I'm always looking to see what people's experience is with growing plants, I like reading Las Politas. It's in Southern California. They're hotter, they're drier, but it is useful to read that and get that experience, to see what they have. And part of it is, it's like, if this plant is surviving on clay there, it will probably survive on clay in my yard, because it won't be as hot as it is down there in Las Politas. So Shelkie, take it away.
Sorry. Okay, so yeah, actually, these two are also my two main resources for me as well. CNPS.org, definitely. Cowscape. Cowscape, definitely, that's the kind of like the number one source out there. It's just so convenient. And also last week, Vivian's presentation, right? It shows us it has so many marvelous tools. So you can just put in the location, and then all the native plants that's really native to that place, to that area will show up. I think that's really one of the most fascinating features of that website. So we all have this, when we are thinking about plants, right? There's a degree about how native are they, right? They are California native, but then are they native to my place? Now, Cowscape can help you on that. So definitely a great place to look at. Las Politas website, it has a lot of great information about the plants. For example, if you want to find out like the manzanitas, there's so many manzanitas, right? But if you want to find out the one that with 6 feet wide, 6 feet tall, and pink flowers, that's the website that can give you that kind of information. They are the nursery themselves and has a long history. So the plant knowledge is really one of the best that's out there. CNPS too. They even have a dedicated section just for these two plants. They tell you everything about all kinds of, like from the very tall tree-like ones to the ground cover ones, what color. They even have lots of videos to show you how those plants are, different plants are like. So I will just second what Madeline just talked about, these two websites.
So Vivian.
Okay, thanks. I'm gonna just type mine into chat real quick here. So the three that I use a lot, besides Cowscape, of course, is and Las Politas, is Calflora. So what Calflora I like because it gives you a good view of what those plants are found around in their native habitats. And that can often give you some insight into how well they'll do in your garden or what you might want to plant with them. So I spend a lot of time hiking, and I use that as a guide as well. And Calflora is a really nice complement to that. The other thing that goes along actually very well with the Embry book is this, the propagation protocol database. So if you're not familiar with that and you want to do any kind of propagation, I strongly recommend that one. I use that a lot at the nursery when we're trying to just figure out why something is or isn't taking. There's a lot of great information in that database. It's in large part used by restoration nurseries. We actually, one of our members in Sonoma, Betty Young, who used to run the Presidio nursery, has put in a tremendous amount of information there on what it took for them to get a lot of different plants to grow. And that one, it's invaluable. So I think if you don't know about it, it's definitely worth taking a quick look. The other one I really enjoy is the San Marcos one. And that one is because I like to know about history behind cultivars, especially. And they have a huge amount of information they have collected over the years about, where plants originated, what cultivars are derived from. And that one, it amazes me how much of a background they have on each individual cultivar. So that's one I go to quite a bit as well. Okay, Madeline?
Okay. So we're if people have other suggestions, if people have other suggestions, people are putting things into the chat now, yay. If you have more suggestions, keep putting them in. If you have questions or more things you'd like to say about different web resources, we invite you to just unmute and talk to the group. Someone is asking about the name of the database, and Rebecca typed, there's the CalFlora database. I'm not sure.
I think that was a question about the propagation protocol database, actually, Madeline. And if you go back and look in the chat, I can type it in again, but I did put all of the three links. I'll put them in again.
Yeah, the URL is in there for the propagation protocol database, but she's going to put that in again. And one of the reasons I don't go to my books as often, because more and more information that from books has been summarized in CalScape. Resources for weeding. Anyone have any suggestions on resources for weeding? I don't know. I mean,
so the California Invasive Plant Council website would be my recommendation. I don't have a book, but definitely this, and I'll put that's the California Invasive Plant Council. Tons and tons of information about, well, mostly removal of invasives, but generally weeds fall into that category.
And the other thing, one thing good, about weeding, Helen Popper's book is gives you a calendar to remind you when you need to be weeding. And that's helpful. It doesn't really tell you what is a weed and what isn't, whereas the invasive Plant Council does. Master gardeners, are there any resources on the common weeds of our area out there?
Well, there's some really in-depth books called Weeds of the West. And if you look through those, a good portion of them are native plants. So like what is considered a weed to the farmer could be a native plant, but to us, all these invasive grasses are weeds.
Okay, yeah, and also the suggestion just went into that Vivian said that the Gardening with Natives email list, the forum, is a good place to ask questions about weeding. And there's Weeds of the West. Yeah, I guess it depends. Is it a home gardener's approach or is it an agriculturist's approach? But I think also the pictures of plants with location information, decent pictures of plants with location information, can also be are also frequently identified if you go to either the CNPS Santa Clara Valley Facebook page or Gardening with Natives Forum or the state Facebook page. Although I think that Gardening with Natives, it does have people from all over the state, but it's a little bit more, it is more local. so people might help you. In fact, I have something that's coming up in my vegetable garden I thought might be a native iris, but I'm beginning to suspect it isn't. So I'm going to put a photo out there and see if someone can help me not make a serious mistake in letting this thing survive. Oh, Bill McCormick reminds us that the Gardening with Native email list forum is also searchable. Bill, do you have any hints on what kind of, what would be a good search term? What would be good search terms to use? Like weeds? Would that produce some good hits on the Gardening with Natives email list?
I haven't tried searching for weeds, but I think people, I see a lot of the questions that come in now as moderator, and a lot of them are people starting out in general. And so it's a great resource for people starting out in general. And a lot of the questions they could just search, they may be able to refine their question after seeing how do I get started, so forth. And weeds would be one of the things that comes up all the time.
And wow, there's another link here to some cards that have great pictures of common weeds. I think I'm going to check that out. This is all going to go into a list that will be emailed to all of you who are attending. Okay, Rebecca uses them too. That could have really helped me when I was seeding my meadow. So, what do you think? Are we running out of questions on this? Should we go? We should go to our next segment. And in this segment, we are talking about courses, workshops, and other kind of things that are experience-based as resources to learn about native plants or native plant gardening. And I will start out with something that really helped me when I wanted to start native plant gardening here. And that was going to garden tours. In fact, that was our Growing Natives garden tour. Because for me, looking at other people's gardens and seeing how they were using native plants and seeing what was growing in what kind of location really helped me get started. It also was very inspiring. And more importantly, my husband was skeptical, but after he started, I got him to go on the garden tour. He became an enthusiastic supporter of the idea of taking out our lawn. So, but, and with garden tours too, you can always, if you see some plant that you're interested in that looks really good, that's growing very nicely in the garden, you can always usually you can talk to the owner about it and get some clues about what's a good way to keep it happy. And we are, God willing, going to have we are planning an in-person garden tour for the spring. The website, the URL went in there, and it's going to be the first weekend in April. So, and one time I also went to Bringing Back the Natives, the East Bay garden tour, which was very entertaining, but it wasn't as useful for me. I mean, it was really nice to see those plants and everything. I didn't find it as useful because I realized that the East Bay has a very different microclimate. So that's why I like our garden tour especially. So, Shelkie, take it away.
Yeah, so for me, the botanical gardens or the UC gardens, they all have pretty good native plant section, and those are my places, the place I go to learn a lot about the native plants and native gardens. The 3 gardens that I really like are the first one, San Francisco Botanical Garden. Second, UC Berkeley Botanical Garden, and third, UC Santa Cruz. So the first 2, the San Francisco Botanical Garden and UC Berkeley, they both have very big, actually all 3 have dedicated native garden sections, but these 2 are especially big. And I think maybe San Francisco has a relatively more complete types of the native plants, from manzanitas, ceanothus, from the big ones all the way to the smaller shrubs and ground covers. It's always a pleasure to go and take a look. It's a really nicely cultivated, nicely created native plants collection over there. So San Francisco Botanical Garden, if you have not, I highly, highly recommend that you go and take a look. The UC Berkeley one is also really awesome. What I really like is that they have this huge collection of the manzanitas. So if you like manzanita like I do, that's like a heaven. And so many different types, and then everyone is very nicely labeled, so you can see what their names are. And along with that, they also have many other native plants over there. UC Santa Cruz, they have a native garden section, California Native Garden. Also very nice, quite a few, quite pretty large number of native plants over there too. But they also have, what made UC Santa Cruz really good is that they also have a huge collection of Australian plants. And a lot of them are those summer dry plants, very drought tolerant and can grow well in our climate. So, and those are very exotic, a lot of them exotic, very interesting, and you will not see them at other places. So the visit there is always also always a very pleasant experience that you get to see these very special plants. They have these grevillea, like huge different types. And then when you go there, you always see all these hummingbirds flying around. And you always see people with these huge cameras trying to take photos of those hummingbirds. So all in all, these 3 gardens are all the places I will highly recommend if you want to see native plants, how they look like, and also learn about their names and things like that.
Okay. So Vivian, well, wait, who's next in? Rebecca, would you like to share the screen?
Yeah.
You have some beautiful slides.
Mine is more simple, just to go hike and be out in nature and observe from what you see out there. And if you can't hike, are you going to share the slides, Madeline, or do I?
Oh, I can do it if you're not set up. Let me just bring them up.
You're probably better at it than me.
Okay, just give me 1 sec.
No problem.
Madeline, do you want me to do it? I've got it set up already. If you
Okay,
want.
great. That would be great. I didn't get it set up ahead of time. I'm sorry.
Right. Let's see. Whoops, here we go. And hold on, let me start at the beginning. Whoops. This is not the beginning, just a sec.
Well, the beginning was, yeah. That's
Let's
fine.
start. Is that all right?
Yes, that's fine. That's where I was. This is just, I agree with everybody about the web resources and everything, but I also like to say just take it with a grain of salt, because this is a plant that I learned about just from observing it, and the things that it says on Calscape about it, my experience has been quite different. So that's where seeing things lived in can always give you a different experience than, life is different than just in books, and we're all individuals. And the next one is just guidebooks. We talked about that earlier. And you could probably skip to the next one. And this is a cool thing I saw the other day. And it's a leafcutter bee, cuts a perfect circle. And it was on a bay tree at my mom's house. And I've never seen leafcutters go to bay tree. So that was a cool thing to learn. And I Googled it, and I didn't see any information about, I didn't look extensively, but I didn't see any information about leafcutters using bay. So that's something to just learn from seeing. And if you can't go hiking, maybe you don't have the ability or whatever, the transportation, and you can always just watch in your garden the birds and the bees, and the plants will teach us. And then the last one is also going to demo gardens. This is a garden I worked on with the local Native tribes. So like the land acknowledgement in the beginning, working with the Native people and learning from them. And there's a couple Native people that do classes and consultations, and if we're looking to them for that knowledge, then just to be conscientious to pay them and respect them for their time, and also contribute and engage with these groups. The Amamutsin has a couple gardens. This garden is up at Castle Rock State Park. And those are my main things. Thank you.
Thanks. So, Vivian.
Hey, thanks, Rebecca. That was great. I love the way you have observed all these things. It's wonderful to be informed by both our own gardens and hiking. I think that's really the key to everything, is looking at it right there, real life. So I was going to mention a couple things. One of them is a class at Foothill College. Oh, whoops. Sorry, hold on. I don't have my video on. So in spring quarter at Foothill College in the Hort department, they have a native plant ID class. It's usually taught by Frank Nicoli, and it is an amazing class. It's pretty intense. Yeah, one of the field trips that we went on when I took it a few years ago was actually to the San Francisco Botanical Garden. It was actually, I think, the first time that I had been in the native plant section of that garden. And it's a great section. And if you go there with Frank, it's an incredibly intense experience, because he walks, talks, and you have to take notes the entire time you're doing it. And he never stops, but it is an incredible learning experience. So if you want a crash course in native plants, hands-on, seeing things, I highly recommend that class. Another thing, I was going to mention hiking, but Rebecca covered that really, really well. So instead, I'm going to mention a couple things on our chapter website. So the first one is we have a page on gardening resources, and I'm going to put that link in chat right now. If you go to our website, just off the top page, and you go to the gardening menu at the top, and you do the pull down, at the bottom it says gardening, of that menu it says gardening resources. The direct link to it is right there in chat right now on that page. So I'm walking you through how to get there, but if you just want to go direct, I'm going to put a very long web address in there, and that is a link of public gardens and public spaces that have native plants locally in our area. I think it's got a lot of good resources, but I'm the person who updates it. And if anybody knows of other places, so if you take a look at that and you see gardens that you know of that are public and local and are not included, please let me know. You can do that. You can actually just send to info@cnps-scb.org and I'll add them, because it's, I think, going to see public gardens, and Shelkie named 3 really wonderful ones. And I noticed in chat, a lot of people mentioned Tilden. And by the way, Tilden and Berkeley, they're right next to each other. So make a day of it and go to both of them, because that's a fun thing to do as well. But looking at public gardens, that's just a wonderful way of getting ideas for your own garden, seeing how plants actually perform. And there's so many now that are where people are starting them in just like small little public spaces. And those I'm really interested in getting more information about. So please, 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 if you know of any that aren't on that list, let me know and I'll add them so other people can find them easily too. Okay, I think that was all I was going to say about.
Okay, so we are opening this up for more suggestions, questions, and comments. Radhika was asking about good places to go in the Bay Area in June, July, August. I would, add probably September when it's hot. And I know typically San Francisco is usually about 10 degrees cooler than Santa Clara Valley, or at least my part of it. So I remember one time when it was like over 100 here, and we went to San Francisco, and it was in the 70s by the ocean. Doesn't always work, but and even Berkeley is often cooler. Tilden's a little higher, but the Berkeley garden can be kind of downright chilly on some winter days. So those are good places to go when it's hot. And Santa Cruz too.
I was actually going to suggest Larner Seeds too in Bolinas. That's usually pretty cool. And they have a really nice demo garden there as well. And then of course you can also buy seeds, which is nice.
And I was just going to, on Rebecca's point that, books don't tell you everything. I mean, there are things that are kind of hard to figure out, and you just have to go with it. I mean, for example, coffee berry. Most people, books and even most gardeners say coffee berry is really easy to grow. Coffee berry, I've tried it in multiple places in my yard, and it all dies. It dwindles slowly. It's sad. According to books, it should be doing okay. So I don't know. I think coffee berry is a great shrub when I admire it in other people's gardens, but for some reason, it does not like my yard. And that's one of the things you just have to observe. And if there's things that do really well in your yard, plant more of them. Yeah, observe what does well and kind of give up a little bit on things that are always struggling.
I do the same thing with design and maintenance, Madeline. When you see a garden, you may think it's one way and then a condition changes, or you see from experience that one species just is not doing well and it's time to give up and try again. I did just want to add about, somebody asked about where can they engage with some native classes. One of my favorite people is at Native Hummingbird on Instagram. He does a lot of classes, and Canyon Consulting is out of Indian Canyon, I believe in Hollister area. So that's a little more local. The Amamutsan tribe has places in near Pescadero. And they don't always do classes, but I think they do more work days. And I always mess up how to say it, Sagaratea Land Trust. And a lot of tribes like the Amamutsan and the Muekma, they're relearning the plants themselves. So, it's not not necessarily for us to just go pick their brain on everything, but it could be a very mutually beneficial but relationship. But I think CNPS needs to, or we need to be more humble just to engage that we live on native land, and even though we have all these expertise, there's still so much missing in that. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over.
No.
I just put the Amamutsun event link there. So if you're interested in doing volunteer work at one of their gardens or their other events, there, that link is there at the bottom there. And thanks for bringing that up, Rebecca.
Well, I see another really interesting thing that has come in, that Hedgerow Farms, which grows all kinds of things for restoration gardening, and also trying to get agriculture to do native hedgerows. They're going to have an open house on the 29th of April. And they're in Winters, which is a little bit north of Davis. So that could be really, really fascinating. Do we have any other questions?
Well, there's a link in there to the Marshall Caudle Gardens too, and that's a great one. We had a talk a couple weeks ago about that one. So if it's great to just go see it, but there's also, if you're curious about it, you can also just go look at the talk too. But yeah, definitely go see it.
And yeah, their garden is really thriving, and they've done a lot of stuff with raised beds. But if you want to sort of look at how how the master gardeners have built this really fabulous demonstration garden, you can get really good ideas for your yard. And they have great signage. It's really educational to go there. And it's also a good place to go to. It's also a good place to go if you live in a place where your yard is kind of flat and hot. Marshall Caudle is your place for seeing what will work for you. You know, like I love the Edgewood. Edgewood has a nice demonstration garden too. It's a habitat that I don't have, but it's really beautiful. That's another, So if you live on the peninsula, you also might want to check out the Edgewood Preserve little demonstration garden. I mean, it's beautiful for anyone to see, but if you're looking for gardening ideas, if you live in that kind of microclimate, it's a great place to go.
Another great one, if you're in the Palo Alto area too, is Bull Park, which our former nursery manager, Melanie Cross, has been working on quite a bit recently, but it was already wonderful, but they're expanding it. And Melanie and Claire Elliott from Grassroots Ecology, they've been doing tremendous work on it, and it's fabulous. So I would highly recommend visiting Bull Park if you get a chance. At Gamble Garden Center too, in Palo Alto, that they have a really nice native garden there now as well.
There are also the master gardeners have other demonstration gardens. There's one in Palo Alto and a little one at Emma Prush and Berger, and Sunnyvale had a little native plant area. So there's a couple little pocket areas if you're not in central San Jose.
And in San Mateo County, there's it's at the library in, what town is it?
Woodside.
Woodside has a nice garden, and also I think in San Mateo they have that new one. Where's the one that Carolyn Dorsch worked on?
That's the San Carlos Native Plant Garden. It's the city of San Carlos.
Yeah. So Woodside has a really nice garden, but San Carlos Garden is newer, but it's also very nice. Visited that once. And this is also, Carrie Olson put in that Cabrillo College, which is in Santa Clara County, has a California native plant sauce class, and it's taught by Nikki Hughes, who used to be running, well, the late lamented Gold Rush Nursery.
I
And
think
she
Gold
said
Rush is still around. It's just not in quite in the same format. I thought.
well, I don't know. They haven't really responded. I mean, I know she told me at one point she was on hiatus, but it's been on hiatus for some time. If it's back, I'd love to know. But
I did want to mention that all the public gardens that we were just talking about are on the public garden list on our website. So if you want to know exactly where they are, you can go on our website and find that. And I put that link in a little bit earlier.
okay, yeah, Carrie said it is no longer, but she keeps the website up for information purposes. I just love that nursery. I'm sad about it. And there's there's a California native seed harvesting class that the UC Master Gardeners of Monterey and Santa Cruz counties do. That would be, if you're interested in propagation, that would be very interesting. You know, and also if you're looking for things to do in hot weather, going to the coast is always good. Okay.
Someone was asking you to repeat the thing about seed harvesting, Madeline. Carrie asked you to repeat that.
Okay.
Or is there something you can just type in?
I'll retype it down here. I just copied it this is from Carrie Olson. And so it's interesting because they have a demo garden at in Watsonville.
Well, that's a lot of new things that I didn't know about. I'm sort of excited to check some of the hedgerow, especially. I'm really excited about going to visit hedgerow.
Yeah, I was interested. Hedgerow, you have to my church wanted to give out seed packets of California poppies, and I told them that instead of buying them, we should put them together ourselves. And I was looking at both Hedgerow and Larner Seeds, but then I realized Hedgerow you have to spend at least $100. That's your minimum. And at Larner Seeds you can buy a pound or 2 pounds. You can they're geared for smaller amounts. But Hedgerow has a lot of really fascinating seeds. If you want to cover a whole lot of ground, they're a good place to go. Yeah, it's not seed harvesting time yet, as Carrie says, but yeah.
And we'll do another seed exchange this year.
So the question is, we're getting a lot of requests on YouTube for links, etc., for the gardens. Will they automatically get the list too? Do we have?
What I will do on YouTube is when I update the description for YouTube. So you mentioned that we're going to email the list. What actually is going to happen is I'm going to make the list. I'm going to put it on our website. I will email a link to that list to everyone who's registered on Zoom. I'll put it on Meetup, and I will also put it on YouTube along with the recording. So hopefully everybody who is watching currently will be able to get it in one of those ways. And if not, you can just go to our website and you should be able to find it there too. It'll be linked on that gardening resources page.
So Barbara, why don't you put that out on the YouTube chat? Yeah, Point Lobos State Reserve is full of native plants. It's very interesting because if you visit there now or soon, you can see a lot of native iris blooming. There's a lot of native iris that grows under the Monterey pines, I guess.
And actually, there is another thing, and it goes along with hiking, is field trips with chapters. And we have lots of chapters around the Bay. So I know we have people here from Santa Cruz. I know often we have people from East Bay, but I would highly recommend checking out not just our chapter, so Santa Clara Valley's chapters field trips, but also the field trips for the other local chapters. You know, if you're a CNPS, well, actually, even if you're not a CNPS member, a lot of the field trips are open to the public, but it's even better if you join CNPS and become a chapter member with one of the chapters, but you're always welcome to go to field trips with any chapter. And that is a terrific way of learning more about plants, seeing things in the wild.
With people who identify what you're looking at.
And our chapters actually had a field trip to Tilden. I might as well just plug, there will be a conservation conference in October, a CNPS conference that's sponsored by our state office, but it's going to be based in San Jose. There will be field trips attached to that conference. And so that will be, Judy, you want to put the date in the chat or just unmute and say what it is, because I'm suddenly drawing a blank. Well, at any rate, it is in October. You can go to conference.cnps.org to find out more about it. But there will be a field trip, I believe, to Tilden as one of the offerings there. So, and that's another place you can just learn about plants too. There's a whole horticultural track at that conference. So that will be a great place to learn more about native plants as well. I mean, horticulturally things, horticulture track.
Oh, interesting. The event at Hedgerow is with the California Grasslands Association. Okay.
Should we do a last call for suggestions?
Last call for questions and suggestions. So we can compile all this fascinating information into the list of resources that we're going to send you all links to or post links to. And if you don't want to wait for that, the other thing too is if you go down the chat at the very right, there's 3 dots. If you click on that 3 dots, one of the things you can do is save the chat. It gets saved as a text file to your computer. Oh, that's right, the native garden at Foothill and Elkhorn Slough Nursery. Is that Elkhorn Slough Nursery has a garden?
Elkhorn Slough, the Elkhorn Nursery's gone, that closed, but Elkhorn Slough is a preserve and they have a garden there. I think Lyndon's right about that.
Okay.
Should we wrap up?
I think we should wrap up. Well, thank you all for coming out. And thank you for all the good suggestions and questions and help with putting together a more complete list of resources. And we hope to, we hope to see you at our future talks. If you're interested in keying, that's what our next presentation will be on. And more presentations will be scheduled. So getting on our mailing list or checking out our website will keep you up to date on what's coming up next. And hope to see some of you at the photography meeting on the 25th as well.
Oh, I see a question about
keying?
Yeah. So keying is identifying plants by looking at their details. If you look at the Jepson Manual, which is pretty much the definition for all California species, has very precise things in a plant to look at to decide what species it is. Keying is that process of walking down what they call a key, which will tell you what plant parts to look at, and depending on what you find, will tell you the next thing to look for until you've basically narrowed it down to only one possible thing, and then that's what it is. So keying a plant out means you're identifying it to a species level based on a key, a dichotomous key. The class that's coming up, though, it's not strictly just a keying thing. It is on plant taxonomy, so it's actually a class. It's not keying itself. It's going to be a lecture on plant taxonomy, and it's one of the things you need to know in order to do keying. And it's a great class. Dee Himes will be teaching it. She has already done the first part of it, which is on plant morphology. That was last month. And so this month is going to be plant taxonomy. That's next Friday. And it will be on Zoom. You can find it on our website.
But I'll just give you also an example of keying. I am not a necessarily skilled botanist, but when I first got on the tour, we have some squirrel planted oaks, I think, and we wanted to identify them. They were there when we moved in. And so I had a book on the oaks of California, and in the back they have a key. And so you go through step by step. They have questions, and deciding between whether it was a coast live oak or a valley oak, it came down to looking at the underside of the leaves. And with a magnifying glass helped because they have hairs. One of them has hairs on the underside, certain color hairs. So we didn't need sometimes you need a microscope, but in this case, we just needed a small hand lens to help us. And I was able then to identify what oaks I have in my yard, which was helpful. And, you know, there are some books have these very straightforward sort of tables that take you through the questions to kind of help you identify plants. So that was my keying experience, and my husband and I were so proud of ourselves for being able to identify our oaks without having to call in someone who was actually a botanist. Oaks are fairly easy. You're muted, Vivian.
I say oaks can be very complicated, actually. They defy botanists because they hybridize easily.
Okay. I guess ours weren't hybrids. We were lucky.
So should we wrap this up? Is
Yes.
There are two more questions.
When you find squirrel planted oaks, should you leave them? I think that depends on what you want, whether you want an oak wherever it pops up.
Right. I mean, one of the things, I mostly pull them up because I now have enough oaks. In fact, I wish I had known when I first moved in how quickly young oak trees grow, because it would have been nice to take out one or two of them because they'd have a better canopy. You know, they were kind of too close together. But now I'd have to go through the whole permit process. It's not worth it. So you have to look at, you know, do you want an oak where that oak comes up? If you don't want it there, pull it up quick because they throw down those tap roots. Yeah, and I have oaks, so it means every spring I have to go and pull up about, you know, depending on the year, 20 to 50 squirrel planted oaks. Because I have enough shade.
And to answer the question of whether you can put them in a pot and plant them somewhere else, you can actually do that, but you'll always end up with a healthier tree if you just start with an acorn in the place that you want the oak to be. Moving them, especially when they're young, usually works, but they're happier if they just get to stay where the acorn puts down the taproot.
What about planting an acorn in a tree pot or something? Is that a good move, or?
You can do that, but it really straight into the ground is the very best thing if you can protect the, you know, if it's successful. So it, you know, if you want to have a backup, start one in a tree pot, but then also put the acorn in where you want it. And if that acorn is successful, that's the best way to get your tree.
Okay.
All right, is this it? All right, I'm going to shut us down now. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you
Oh.
all.
Yeah, thank you, Shelkie. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, Judy, although I think Judy had to cut out. All right, good night, everybody.
Good night.